Hey everyone, I'm Mariana, this is Impression Blend, and today we are celebrating there being 50,000 of you. My channel has reached 50,000 subscribers, which is absolutely insane to me, so I thought we should celebrate with a Q&A. First of all, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody who has subscribed to my channel, who has been commenting, watching my videos, liking my videos, leaving suggestions, leaving recommendations, watching my channel for as long as you have, whether you've been here since the very beginning or you just subscribed the other day. I am so grateful for every single one of you being here. This may not seem like a big number in the grand scheme of things. There are huge channels on YouTube, but to me personally, that is an insane amount of people. When I started my channel, I didn't think I would have 1,000 subscribers, much less 50,000. So I am so grateful to every single one of you for being here, and let's get into these questions that you guys have asked. But first, I have a giveaway winner to announce. I did a giveaway for a copy of Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir in my review a couple of videos ago, and the winner is Gustavo. Congratulations. I will be reaching out to you on Instagram, so keep an eye on your direct messages. But yes, you are going to be getting a copy of Project Hail Mary. Congratulations. I hope you enjoy the book. Now let's get into these questions that you guys asked. I broke them down into topics, so we are starting with some favorites questions. And the first question here is, what is your favorite movie? I think it's Amadeus, and especially why. I think you think it's Amadeus because that is the first movie that's listed on my Letterboxd page as a favorite, and I just want to let everybody know those favorites are in no particular order, and this doesn't mean that this is my favorite movie of all time, like the first one that is listed there. I change my favorites pretty often on there. I just kind of pick whatever favorite movies I'm currently in the mood for. Also, I put Amadeus first there because the cover of my Letterboxd profile is generated from that first movie that is in the favorites list. So I chose that one because I thought the picture was really cool. But Amadeus is one of my favorite films. I generally always have a hard time answering this question because I don't have a be-all end-all film that is my favorite of all time. I have quite a few favorites. There's a rotation of movies that I watch over and over again. I have an entire video about that. My default answer is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And I think if I was pressured to pick just one movie to keep forever as my favorite and just get rid of every other movie out there, I would consider the trilogy to be one movie. You can't stop me, and I would pick The Lord of the Rings. But I have a lot of other favorites. There is Arrival, there is Blade Runner, there is Alien and Scream and La La Land and Interstellar, Black Swan, The Crow, Inglourious Bastards, Jurassic Park, Old Boy. There are so many movies that I really, really love, and they are near and dear to my heart that picking just one is impossible. But yes, if you just absolutely pressured me, my default answer is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. What are your top 5 favorite horror movies pre-2000? That is pretty difficult because there are so many amazing horror classics. Let's see. I would have to go with Alien and Aliens, of course. I'm counting that as one thing. You can't stop me. Scream, The Shining, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I'm torn between The Fly and The Thing and Fright Night. How am I supposed to pick? I think I'm going to go with The Fly. So those would be 5, but there are at least 10 more that are pre-2000s that I absolutely adore. What are your favorite music bands or artists? Now, I have mentioned this before, but I know there are a lot of new people on my channel, so excuse me for repeating myself. My favorite band of all time is Queen. I don't think anyone could ever beat Queen and Freddie Mercury in my mind for my personal taste. I adore their songs, and there's so much personality, so much heart, so much power and passion in them. It's just, this never gets old. I adore Queen. Some of you also probably already know that I do listen to metal quite a lot, especially recently. And normally I stick to symphonic metal, things like Blind Guardian, Camelot, Nightwish, Within Temptation, stuff like that. But recently, I have discovered Ice Nine Kills, and I have been listening to a ridiculous amount of Ice Nine Kills. It's getting a little weird. They are just so much fun, and what's interesting is that I don't really listen to metalcore. That is not really my thing, but they have horror-themed songs about horror movies and horror novels, and they are amazing and creepy and a lot of fun. They put a lot of work into their music videos as well, and yeah, but listening to a lot of that. But then of course, my entire life I have listened to a lot of classical musicals and movie scores, and the reason for that is that I grew up with classical music and musicals, so that's always going to be something that stays with me. And yeah, that's kind of where I am with music. I know you've said you're not a big animation person, but what are your favorite animated films? Let's see, I would have to go with Spirited Away, Akira, Ghost in the Shell, Princess Mononoke, because that is where I discovered Japanese animation, so that will always be very special to me. Vampire Hunter D, particularly the sequel. Can you guys tell there's a theme here? But if we're talking about American animation, I would have to go with A Nightmare Before Christmas. Like, that is one of my all-time favorites in general. I love The Nightmare Before Christmas. Out of the recent ones, I would say Coco. Coco, I did not expect to love as much as I did, but it was just everything. I loved it. What is your go-to guilty pleasure film? I love this topic because I am not a believer in guilty pleasures as a concept. I mean, why am I supposed to feel guilty about movies that I enjoy just because someone else doesn't enjoy them? I just, I don't know. I don't believe in that concept, but I know what this question means. This question means, what are the movies that you love that aren't really considered good movies? I think my go-to would have to be The Devil Wears Prada. I know it's cheesy, but come on, who doesn't love a good makeover? It's just a movie that makes me feel good, to be honest. If I'm in a bad mood, I know that if I put on The Devil Wears Prada, I am going to feel a little bit better by the end of that film. It's just how it works. The same goes for Love Actually and The Holiday. Those are my holiday season movies that I really like to watch every year. I really don't get the hate that those two movies get because they are a part of a specific genre. They're not trying to be masterpieces, Oscar winners, all-time best movies, but they are good at what they do, and I love the cast, so yeah. If we're talking about horror, I would say I Know What You Did Last Summer. That one, I don't think it's an amazing film. It's just very nostalgic for me, and I think it's a fun, very, very 90s horror mystery. I see it for what it is. And once again, I don't feel bad about enjoying this movie, even though it's obviously not a masterpiece. It's a fun, nostalgic movie for me. Also, Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. The first three movies, not the rest of that franchise doesn't exist, okay? Let's agree on that. I have such nostalgic feelings about Pirates of the Caribbean and seeing them in theaters multiple times. I was obsessed with these movies for a very long time, and they just make me happy. They're fun adventure movies, and love the characters, love the cast. Even though the second and the third movie are not as good as the first one, I still think it's a fun trilogy to watch. If you could pick one movie that you never watched in theaters to see in IMAX, what would it be? That is tough. Just one? Why just one? You guys love making me pick just one thing. You pick just one. I'm very torn between Alien and Blade Runner, and I think I'm going to go with Blade Runner. Yeah. That'd be amazing in IMAX. What are the best horror and sci-fi films without gore? Sci-fi films without gore are everywhere. I mean, unless you're talking horror sci-fi, then that might be a little bit difficult. But there are tons of amazing sci-fi films that don't involve gore. I mean, there's no gore in Arrival or Blade Runner or Moon or Ex Machina or Looper. I mean, okay, it depends on what you see as gore. I see gore as something that is in your face, guts, ridiculous gore, blood, everything. That doesn't happen that often in sci-fi movies. If you're talking about just any kind of blood or violence at all, yeah, that might be tough because generally there is some sort of disturbing imagery involved in sci-fi because they're very dramatic circumstances. Someone is probably getting stabbed or hurt at some point, and that might not be as graphic as it would be in a straight up horror film, but it's a thing, you know, might happen in sci-fi. But there's definitely not that much gore in famous sci-fi films. Like, where's the gore in Interstellar or Inception or any of the classics? Unless you're talking about Alien, but that's sci-fi horror, or The Thing, that is sci-fi horror. Now, if we're talking about horror films, that's a little bit harder. Once again, that depends on your threshold for gore in general. Something like Lake Mungo doesn't have gore. Even something like The Ring, the remake I'm talking about, it doesn't have actual gore in it. It has disturbing imagery in other ways, but specifically gore, not really. Something like The Babadook. And also take a look at the classics that aren't slashers or famous psychological horror films. There are plenty of them out there. I would say that unless you're in a specific subgenre that is gore heavy, you're going to find a lot of films that aren't that difficult to watch. All right, so the next section here I have is book-related questions. The first one is, what horror novel or novels would you like Denis Villeneuve to adapt for the big screen? Well, I always talk about Night Film, but I promise I'm not going to talk about Night Film again because I think at this point, most of you know that Night Film is my #1 on the wish list of book-to-screen adaptations, particularly by Denis Villeneuve. If that ever happened, that would be amazing. But let's pick something else. I think it'd be interesting to see him adapt something like Kill Creek. I do think I've mentioned that before now that I'm talking about it. But Kill Creek is a haunted house novel that has quite a few interesting characters to work with, and it does something interesting with the haunted house trope in general, so that would be cool. It would also be interesting to see him readapt I Am Legend, because let's be real, if you've read I Am Legend, you know the film adaptation, not that amazing. So I would love to see him actually stay true to the psychology and the themes of I Am Legend, the novel, so that would be interesting. Or there's this book called Foe. It's by Ian Reid, the same author who wrote I'm Thinking of Ending Things. And it is a sci-fi psychological thriller. Not necessarily straight up horror, but there are horror elements in it. And that one is, I think, actually very up his alley. That would be really cool too. Do you read extreme horror books? Edward Lee, Jack Ketchum? I do not. I have a bit of an issue with horror books in general. I feel like most of them either aren't really horror, aren't really that scary, they're more thrillers, or they're just gross and way too graphic. I don't like reading graphic descriptions of stuff, and I don't like reading body horror or extreme violence. It's not appealing to me. For example, I read The Troop by Nick Cutter, and that's not even an extreme horror book, but it is very body horror heavy, and I did not enjoy that experience at all. I don't find it scary. I just find it disgusting. So I wasn't a big fan of that. And I don't think I'm ever going to be reading any Jack Ketchum based on what I've heard about him. So it's just not for me. I don't like extreme violence and gore in movies even. And then reading it on the page for a prolonged amount of time, why? I don't want that. What is the most influential book you have ever read? That is actually a tough question because by definition, the most influential book I've ever read would be the book that got me into reading. That is something that opened me up to a whole world of literature, right? And that book would have to be The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, because I could not put that down. And that was the first time I actually had that experience with a book. It actually made me interested in literature and reading more. So that is also where my love for revenge stories comes from. I mentioned it in one of my previous videos, but that has shaped my preference for that type of storyline. Also, another classic and something I consider to be my favorite book of all time is The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. That is actually something I'm rereading at the moment. I don't know what number reread is this. It's definitely more than 5. But I love that book, and it is so strange and unlike anything else. It's a wild ride. There's so much to digest there, so many ideas, so much philosophy in those ideas. But in general, there is magical realism, there's a fascinating storyline, there's a love story, there's a magical giant black cat that talks. So that has definitely influenced me a lot as well, because it introduced me to so many ideas and made me research things, and also the way the author writes is absolutely stunning. So I am a big fan of that. Those 2 books would have to be the most influential for me, just because they were something I experienced pretty early on in my reading journey, and they really changed how I saw things from there on. What's the book you'd most like to see adapted as a movie for the first time, or one that didn't get the best movie that you'd like to see a redo? That is actually a question someone else asked, so I thought I would answer that. We already talked about I Am Legend. That movie needs a redo. That adaptation needs a redo. So that's for the second part of the question. The first part of that question, I am actually very much looking forward to someone at some point, hopefully, making the First Law trilogy into a movie trilogy, or maybe into like an HBO TV series. Maybe that would be a more fitting format. But I need to see the First Law adapted into something, because it is an untapped potential for adaptations. I mean, these characters are fantastic. I think we could hire some amazing actors that would be super memorable, and the world isn't overly heavy on fantasy, so it wouldn't be that difficult to pull off as far as effects go. I think it'd be great. Someone needs to get on that. The First Law by Joe Abercrombie. Adapt it. Now, moving on to some opinion-based questions. Do you think the quality of films has declined in the last 10 years? No, I don't think so. I think we have bad films and good films, and that has always been that way. The issue is what we see advertised. Amazing films exist. They come out. However, people go to see franchises in movie theaters, so it makes it feel like that is all that comes out. Movies that are just a clone of one another, movies that belong to the same universe. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I think there should be a variety of stuff coming out. I don't think that franchise shouldn't exist, but when that is what we're going to see, that is what the studios are going to sell us. But there are so many fantastic films that come out that are foreign language films, that are independent films, that are smaller budget films. They exist, we just have to look for them. So no, I think there are bad films and there are good films, just like there's always been. There are more movies coming out in general compared to like 30 years ago. So of course there's going to be more bad movies coming out, but also a lot of good movies coming out. Just have to find them. I mean, look at the year 2019. There's so many fantastic films, they don't fit into a top 10. There were literally multiple masterpieces made in 2019. What is your view on superhero movies? Are you a fan? Are they good cinema in general? That is kind of connected to the previous question. Am I a fan? I am tired of superhero movies. I really am. I don't need everything to be the MCU. I don't need the non-MCU superhero stuff to be a cinematic universe either. I don't need everything to be a thing that is multiple movies and multiple TV shows and miniseries. Just calm down, please. I'm a fan of moderation when it comes to things. Too much of a good thing is bad. There are really good superhero movies out there, and who's to say that they're not cinema? If they're good movies, then why aren't they cinema? Of course they are. However, when there's just multiple ones coming out each year, and there's more and more and more of that content, then it's oversaturation, and I think we are absolutely oversaturated with the superhero stuff. The only superhero thing I have interest in right now is The Boys. Are you excited for House of the Dragon? Have you read Fire and Blood? I am cautiously optimistic about House of the Dragon. I think it could be really good. I think it could be really lame. I also think it could be very average and not creative at all. I have not read Fire and Blood just yet. I do own it and I do plan to read it, particularly before the show comes out, but I have not read it yet. I am not super excited about the images that came out. There were a few images that looked really good, but they all look very dark and gray. They just look very grim. And just because it's a grim setting of a world doesn't mean everybody's look has to be grim and everybody's outfit has to be grim. Like, let's have some fun with it. Also, I'm going to be honest, I do not love the Matt Smith casting at all. I cannot see him outside of the Doctor Who universe. He looks weird in that wig. I'm sorry, don't like it. That's definitely something I'm going to have to get used to. But absolutely going to watch the series. I'm going to do some recaps, some reviews. Look forward to it when it comes out. You guys know I love Game of Thrones. Well, the good seasons of Game of Thrones, but it's a very special thing to me. That's where my channel started, Game of Thrones. So yes, I definitely will be watching and reviewing House of the Dragon. What upcoming movie and book are you most looking forward to? The movie would have to be Dune, of course. I've been looking forward to that for years now, or at least feels like years. No, it's definitely been years since it's been announced. The book is The Wisdom of Crowds by Joe Abercrombie. You guys know I'm a huge fan of Abercrombie, and he has a new book coming out, so I cannot wait to get my hands on it and read it. It's going to be great. I'm sure I'm going to love it. Also, in the same comment, what movie do you think has been most true to the book and which movie has the opposite? The first thing I want to say here is that being true to the source material does not mean this is going to be a good movie. Movies and books are different mediums of storytelling. You could have a faithful adaptation of something that is not going to work as a movie. It's an option. But then on the other side of the spectrum, there are things like Blade Runner that is a very loose adaptation of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, but it is an iconic masterpiece. So clearly being faithful to the book is not the key here. I would say the movies that are very faithful and also excellent movies would be The Shawshank Redemption. It is very, very close to the book, and it is one of the best films ever made. Also, something like No Country for Old Men, an amazing novel by Cormac McCarthy and an amazing film adaptation. And Gone Girl. Gone Girl is very close to source material, and the tweaks that they made, I think, made the movie actually better than the book. Where do you see BookTube and movie and TV tube going in the next few years? I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. I have no idea, but I do hope to see more creativity right now, and I am part of that problem, I know, but there is just not much creativity going on in BookTube or MovieTube because we're all making the same types of videos, and it's been like that for a while. But as more people join these communities, we're going to see eventually people coming up with new ways to discuss film and books and new ways to present these videos, new ways to do things, new approaches, and I'm very excited to see that. Do you consider that going to the cinema will be gradually lost and more because of the situation we currently live in? No, not at all. I've talked to so many people who don't even go to movies that often normally, who say they miss movie theaters and can't wait to go back to movie theaters. I can see movie theaters moving towards a more premium experience and having that be a selling point. But no, I don't think cinemas are going anywhere. We all miss movie theaters and experiencing things on the big screen, and people love experiencing things with other people. So why would that ever go away? In addition to Hereditary and I'm Thinking of Ending Things, is there a particular film performer or filmmaker who you simply cannot believe was not Oscar nominated? There are so many snubs. There are snubs every year. The one that always comes to my mind is Jake Gyllenhaal for Nightcrawler. When I saw that film, I was convinced that Jake Gyllenhaal is going to win the Oscar for Best Actor. There was no doubt in my mind. And then he wasn't even nominated. I have no idea what happened there. That is an absurd snub. As far as entire films go, The Shining was nominated for exactly 0 Oscars, which is absolutely insane to me. More recently, I mean, the year 2019 was so good with movies that we got a lot of snubs there. The Farewell, 0 Oscar nominations. Uncut Gems, 0 Oscar nominations. Portrait of a Lady on Fire, 0 Oscar nominations. Those are all ridiculous snubs to me, and there are many, many more out there. Finally, the last category is going to be a bit of a miscellaneous question category. I couldn't really group them with anything else. So this one is more of a request than a question, but I wanted to include it because I do get this request a lot, and I have a response question to you guys about that. So please do a video on Russian cinema and Russian literature. The issue with that is it's kind of like saying, please do a video on Hollywood cinema. I mean, what do you mean? There is so much to cover. I would love to speak about Russian cinema and Russian literature, and I keep trying to figure out a way to talk about it other than reviewing specific things, which is not what I think you guys want. What is the Russian cinema and Russian literature video that you would like me to start with? It's not like there's a handful of movies and a handful of books to cover. There are so many classics, modern ones, specific genres, specific filmmakers, specific authors, just so much. I don't know where to start with this one. So let me know in the comments, where do you want me to start with my Russian movies and Russian literature videos? What are 5 of the worst films you've ever seen? I mean, I recently watched Await Further Instructions, and that has to be there as one of the worst things I've ever seen. Absolutely despise that film. Also, would have to go with 50 Shades Freed, specifically the 3rd film in that franchise. The franchise is awful to begin with, but the 3rd film, I didn't think this could get any worse, the franchise in general. And somehow we did. It's awful. Cannot stand the sequel to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I know that movie has fans, so I apologize if you love that movie, but it's definitely one of the worst things I've ever seen. I cannot stand the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I don't know how we went from the fantastic film that is the first movie to the sequel that is just bad. Okay, so 2 more. I Spit on Your Grave, 1978. I hate that movie. It's exploitative. It's ridiculous. Don't get me started. Cannot stand that film. Also, last one, Repo the Genetic Opera. Once again, I know that film has a fan base. I hear you guys. I don't get it. I don't get why you guys love that movie. I couldn't even finish it. I don't quit on movies all that often. I could probably count the movies I turned off on one hand because I generally finish movies even if I don't like them. I mean, they're not that long. But this one, I just could not force myself to finish it. I hated every second of it. What are the best books or movies that create a perfect world to get lost in? Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter are kind of the obvious ones, probably. Okay, well, take away my easy answers, right? Of course, Lord of the Rings is the most obvious answer for me personally. That is the #1 place I would want to get lost in. What do I go with here? Maybe something like Fillory from The Magicians. I know Fillory is based on Narnia and very heavily inspired by Narnia, but there's something about Fillory that I really find interesting, so that would be really cool. If we're getting away from books and movies, I would say Azeroth, the World of Warcraft location, is fantastic. I love the lore behind World of Warcraft, and the World of Warcraft universe is so cool and so magical and so fascinating, even though they have giant spiders and I would probably see one, have a heart attack and die immediately, still, I'd love to go. It seems amazing. All right, this is going to be my last question. If you could pick any director, alive or dead, with any actors, alive or dead, to make a movie in the genre of your choosing, your preferred decade of film, which would you choose? This is very, very specific. I do not have a specific enough answer for this, but if I could have another movie made by Andrei Tarkovsky, I don't care who is in it, where it's set, what it's about, what genre it is. I just want another one. I mean, that really is it. If I were to go with a very specific preference, I mean, Sci-fi is always going to be my choice because that's my favorite genre, but really, I don't care. Just give me another movie by Andrei Tarkovsky. That's it. All right, guys, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. And once again, thank you so much for all your kind words, for subscribing, for watching my videos, for commenting and liking and sharing and all of that. I appreciate every single one of you. Of course, a special thank you to all of my patrons who are supporting me on Patreon, with an extra special thank you to the patrons whose names are on the screen right now. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos, follow me on social media if you haven't yet. Those links are going to be in the info box below, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye!